Today on Outside the Box Reviews, Assassin Week continues, and today we are looking at the NECA Player Select Assassin's Creed 2 Ezio Auditore Da Firenze action figure. As the title implies, this is the second Assassin's Creed figure released by NECA. I personally chose this variant of it. There's another one who the box declares as Ezio Master Assassin, which is him in his darker costume. But this is the most iconic to me. I always think of Ezio in the white robes. So I went with this version of the figure for my collection. And let's take a closer look at the protagonist of Assassin's Creed 2. Now right off the bat I have to say I love the first Assassin's Creed game. And with Assassin's Creed 2, I was wondering if it could live up to the hype, if it could be as cool as the first game. And I was so pleasantly surprised that I felt it severely surpassed the first game. The game mechanics were much better, and among other things, the protagonist I thought was a lot more likable. I've always liked Ezio as the protagonist. He's a lot of fun. That's something that Altair didn't bring to the table at all, and even though I haven't gotten terribly far in Assassin's Creed 3, Connor doesn't really bring it to the table either. He's a lot more in that Altair mode from what I can see. But Ezio is always fun with his not serious take on everything, his womanizing and his just kind of playful nature with everything. So that's part of the reason why I was willing to go pick up all three incarnations of this character from NECA. As I'd mentioned before, it was the Brotherhood figure that got me into the whole Assassin's Creed figure line from NECA. And this piece here represents a very much a middle ground between the Brotherhood Ezio and the Assassin's Creed Altair. The sculpting is kind of in that in-between phase, the articulation's kind of in between. It's a very in-between figure all around. We have Ezio's head sculpt here. The soft rubber that makes up his hood is pretty thick around this front part, so it really does obscure his eyes. And honestly, I think that's kind of a good thing because they don't look all that good. The sculpt doesn't look particularly like the character. The paint isn't great. He does have his little scar on his chin. There's no painted on extra crap that's not supposed to be there, so that's a plus. He does look good. I especially like the profile view. I've always liked the profile view of the Assassin's hood. I always think it looks really cool. There's some nice texture and molding in there. There's a nice gray paint on here with a nice wash to give it texture and everything. You can see his necklaces in there. We've got all of his robes up here. He has more, I guess, Renaissance style clothing, which makes sense. He's got the red stripes going down, some nice buttons here. The big pad on his shoulder, which has a very cool leather look to it. It's got some cracks and some good detailing and all the little painted rivets like the other figure. One part I really like is up here where the collar is opened up. He has the main collar, and then he has this red piece with a very nice metallic gold paint on it. It's very cool detail work right there. Really gives it a very authentic look. He has this big chunky assassin belt buckle. He's got the little front part, the shorter end here. It's all red on the back and detailed on the front, and the back of his little cloak or tunic or whatever coming down the back. I'll flip it around. Just like with the gold, there's some really nice printing detail on here, some embroidery, I guess it would have been in real life. He's got the little sash hanging off his belt. We have some pouches on the back end of the belt, all the straps in the back, looking a lot better than Altair's did. They flow a little better, the sculpting's a little thicker. As you can see here, the rubber piece meets the hard sculpt, and I think it flows a little better than it did on Altair. He has his brown and red little half cape, I guess you would call it. It comes down to one side. Within the game, this would have been something you could change out depending on what city you're in. His pants are just kind of the standard gray. He has some big, tall boots, rubberized at the top so you don't mess this whole part up. As always, some nice work on the buckles and rivets and everything. But overall, fairly plain-looking boots. They didn't go crazy on these. He's got his puffy, kind of off-white sleeves up here. His brown thing around his wrist. His main gauntlet over here, which has some good detailing on it. The Assassin's logo and the silver detailing. It says one bare hand, and then his one Michael Jackson gloved hand. Now, the hidden blades on this figure are a little strange. The only accessories he came with were these blades. Now, the one here on his right hand, which is the second blade, is a removable piece. So you can take it off and nothing there. And then you just take the blade and peg it into the wrist. And now he has his hidden blade fully extended. Now over here on his left hand, you have the full mechanism sculpted in there, which is really nicely detailed. And then that can be pulled out. So it kind of strikes me as odd that they went this way. I guess by design it would have made more sense to do it this way, but it feels weird that the blades aren't the same. They're very different. This one is just a sliding mechanism. That is what I'm used to on these figures. And this one's just a removable piece, which just seems very strange to me. You would have thought they could have fit this mechanism here and just covered it up to look like the sleeve. It shouldn't have been an issue. But that's the route they chose to go with him. For articulation, Ezio has a ball-jointed neck. He has a pretty good range of motion, side to side. You could tilt it side to side. Decent amount up. Really only looking level, but that works for the character, I think. You don't really look up a whole lot as an assassin. You kind of have the hood down and look mysterious. And then, of course, you can get it down. He has pin socket shoulders. This piece on his shoulder is a soft rubber, though it's kind of detaching on mine, but it does limit your articulation, except of course if it gets pushed up, which I'm assuming is what happened to this. I bought this figure used off eBay, so I'm assuming whoever had it before made that mistake. Up and down on it. You can bend at the elbow, though it is fairly limited, about 45 degrees. You can rotate. You have a ball-jointed wrist on both arms, both limited a little bit by the hidden blade. If you pop that blade out on this side, you get a little more of a range. This side is also limited because of the sculpt around the wrist, though it is actually attached to the hand. So it's there with the hand as it moves, which is a little odd to me. You have a ball-jointed waist with a great range of movement. The legs can go forward and back. You have to rotate them. It's kind of that Marvel movie style hip where you have to rotate it to get it out to the side and then rotate at the upper leg. Bend and rotate at the knee. And then bend and rotate at the ankle. It is limited by the shape of the boot. You can't really go forward as much as I would have liked, which is a very big disappointment to me, because you can't get him in as cool a poses if you can't go forward. As I said earlier in the review, this figure is pure middle of the road to me. He's not phenomenal. He's not that bad. There's just not a whole lot to say about him. He's kind of just meh, I guess. Which is a little upsetting because this was the introduction to the character for the video game world. So it would have been nice if he'd gotten a little nicer of an action figure. But as I mentioned before, this is kind of in the transitional time of NECA, where they were moving away from being statue figures. They've kind of started releasing the Terminator line around this time, I believe. So they were starting to play with more articulation. I think this is one of the early figures they did with leg articulation and things like that. So some concessions have to be made on that point, that this may be result more of inexperience on the company's end than anything else. It's still an overall good figure, and I'm going to give it a pretty mild recommend. Not nearly as weak as the one for Altair. I feel like this is a much better figure than that one. However, it's not a super strong recommend on this guy. Take a look online at the other version, the darker costume for Ezio, the Master Assassin version. Looking at the packaging pictures, he may not come with this second removable blade from what I'm seeing. He may just have the one retractable blade, which makes my case even stronger for picking up this version of the character. But the way that the Altair was, I kind of would have wished they would have given us an alternate gripped hand and maybe a sword or something else. Particularly a sword, I think, would have been nice with this figure, just to give him the actual weaponry. That may have bumped this guy up to being a more solid recommend, but with just a hidden blade, while they are iconic to the character, it's just not as appealing of a figure to me as it could have been. Be sure to check out Outside the Box reviews on Facebook, and tune in next time as we continue Assassin's Week And we move not too far into the future this time to look a little later in Ezio's life.